I was tightening the last lug nut on my wife's Honda Civic when the doorbell rang 3 times in rapid succession, each chime more aggressive than the last. My name is Marcus Kendrick, and I had lived in the Sunset Meadows subdivision in Gilbert, Arizona, for exactly 8 months. The house was a modest 3-bedroom ranch style with a 2-car garage that I converted into a home workshop. I worked as a freelance automotive technician, which meant I did brake jobs, oil changes, and basic repairs for neighbors and friends to supplement my income from my day job as a warehouse supervisor. The setup was perfect until that Tuesday afternoon in March, when everything changed. I wiped the grease off my hands with a shop towel and walked through the house to the front door. Through the peephole, I could see a woman in her mid-40s with a blonde bob haircut that looked like it required weekly maintenance and a pantsuit that screamed middle management. She was holding a clipboard against her chest like a shield and tapping her foot impatiently. When I opened the door, she did not even wait for me to say hello. "Mr. Kendrick, I am Patricia Henderson, president of the Sunset Meadows Homeowners Association Board." Her voice had that particular quality that reminded me of a school principal about to hand out detention. "I have received multiple complaints about excessive noise coming from your garage during restricted hours." I glanced at my watch. It was 2:30 in the afternoon. Restricted hours. "I'm sorry, but what are you talking about?" Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. According to Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the HOA bylaws, any mechanical work that produces noise exceeding 70 decibels is prohibited between the hours of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. on weekdays to maintain the peaceful character of our neighborhood. "That's the middle of the day," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "And I just moved here. Nobody told me about that rule. Ignorance of the regulations does not constitute an exemption." She flipped through pages on her clipboard with theatrical precision. "I have documented 3 separate incidents over the past 2 weeks where your impact wrench has disturbed residents. Mrs. Carmichael across the street says the noise interrupts her meditation sessions. The Johnsons next door report that their infant cannot nap properly. And I personally heard the racket from my house 4 doors down." I felt my jaw tighten. The impact wrench she was referring to was a DeWalt cordless model that I had specifically chosen because it was one of the quieter options on the market. I used it maybe 15 minutes at a time, tops. "Look, Mrs. Henderson, I'm just doing basic car maintenance. It's not like I'm running a commercial garage out here. The specific nature of your business activities is irrelevant. The noise level is the issue." She pulled a pink form from her clipboard and thrust it toward me. "This is your formal warning. If I receive one more complaint, the HOA will be forced to impose fines starting at $250 per incident, escalating to $500 for subsequent violations." "You're kidding me." "I assure you, Mr. Kendrick, I never kid about HOA regulations." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "We have worked very hard to maintain property values in Sunset Meadows. We cannot have residents operating unlicensed businesses that create industrial noise pollution. It's not a business. I'm helping people out and working on my own vehicles. If money exchanges hands, it's a business." She tapped the pink form still hanging in the air between us. "And if it creates a disturbance, it violates our community standards. I suggest you find an alternative location for your activities, or restrict them to approved hours between 4 p.m. and 10 a.m. I took the form because I did not know what else to do. Patricia gave me a smile that did not reach her eyes and walked back down my driveway with her heels clicking against the concrete like a countdown timer. My wife Sarah got home from her job at the dental office around 5:30 that evening. I was sitting at the kitchen table with the pink HOA violation notice spread out in front of me next to a copy of the community bylaws that I had downloaded and printed from the subdivision website. "What's that?" Sarah asked, setting her purse down and looking at my face. "Apparently, we're noise criminals." I filled her in on Patricia's visit while Sarah made us both coffee. Her expression shifted from confusion to irritation as I talked. "That's ridiculous. You barely make any noise at all. I can barely hear you when you're working and I'm inside the house." That's what I thought, but according to these rules, they can basically decide what's too loud based on complaints alone. I flipped through the printed pages. There's nothing in here about actual decibel measurements or objective standards. It's all reasonable person language and board discretion. Sarah sat down across from me and read through the violation notice. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. I can't work between 4 p.m. and 10 a.m. That's when I'm at the warehouse or sleeping. And the people who need my help aren't going to wait around for those hours either." We spent the rest of the evening researching HOA noise complaints and what rights I actually had as a homeowner. The Arizona HOA laws gave associations broad authority to enforce community standards, but they also required that enforcement be reasonable and applied consistently. The problem was proving inconsistency or unreasonableness when the HOA board had final say over what those terms meant. I decided to be extra careful over the next few days. I only used hand tools when possible, and when I absolutely needed the impact wrench, I worked as quickly as possible and kept the garage door closed. On Thursday afternoon, I was rotating tires for my neighbor Tom Rodriguez, who lived on the next street over. The whole job took maybe 35 minutes, and I used the impact wrench for less than 5 minutes total. Friday morning, another pink notice appeared in my mailbox. This one informed me that I had violated the noise ordinance again on Thursday, March 16th at approximately 2:15 p.m. The fine amount was $250, payable to the Sunset Meadows HOA within 30 days. Failure to pay would result in a lien being placed on my property. I called the HOA office number listed on the notice and got Patricia's voicemail. "This is Marcus Kendrick at 428 Desert Willow Drive. I'm calling about the violation notice I received today. I kept my garage door closed and minimized tool use. I need to understand how you're measuring this and why normal home maintenance is being treated like I'm operating a construction site. Please call me back." She did not call back that day, or the next. On Monday morning, I drove to the HOA office, which was located in a small commercial plaza near the subdivision entrance. The office was a single room with 2 desks, filing cabinets, and motivational posters about community pride. Patricia was behind one desk, typing on a computer. A younger woman with curly red hair sat at the other desk, looking distinctly uncomfortable when I walked in. "Mr. Kendrick," Patricia said without looking up from her screen. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I left you a message 3 days ago that you never returned. I need to discuss this second violation notice because I don't think it's accurate." The accuracy is not in question. I personally verified the complaint with 2 other board members who also heard the disturbance. "From where?" "How could you possibly hear my garage from 4 doors down with the door closed?" Patricia finally looked at me. "Mr. Kendrick, I don't appreciate your hostile tone. If you would like to dispute the violation, you may submit a written appeal to the board. We meet once per month, and appeals are heard at the end of the agenda if time permits." "If time permits. I'm being fined $250 for using a tool in my own garage in the middle of the day. I think that deserves more than a maybe we'll get to it approach." The red-haired woman cleared her throat. Mrs. Henderson, maybe we could schedule him for the next meeting. It's only 2 weeks away. Patricia shot her a look that could have frozen lava. Mr. Kendrick, as I told you, submit your appeal in writing. The process is outlined in your bylaws. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. I left the office feeling more frustrated than when I arrived. Over the next week, I drafted and redrafted a written appeal, trying to strike a balance between defending myself and not sounding like I was attacking the HOA board. I documented the specific tool I was using, the duration of use, the fact that my garage door was closed, and my belief that the complaints were either exaggerated or based on sounds from another source. I submitted the appeal 10 days before the next HOA board meeting, which was scheduled for April 5th at 7 p.m. in the community clubhouse. The agenda was posted online 3 days before the meeting, and my appeal was listed as item 7 out of 8, after discussions about pool maintenance schedules and landscaping contracts. The clubhouse was a beige stucco building with a small pool and fitness room. About 15 residents were scattered across folding chairs when I arrived at 6:50. Patricia sat at a table at the front with 3 other board members. A thin man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses, a heavy-set woman in her 50s with silver hair, and a younger guy who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. The meeting started with the Pledge of Allegiance and approval of the previous meeting's minutes. Then came 45 minutes of discussion about whether to replace the pool pump or repair it, debate over which landscaping company had the best bid, and an argument about whether the fitness room should have new equipment or just repairs to the existing treadmill. By the time Patricia announced my appeal, it was 8:20 and half the audience had left. Item 7, Patricia said in a bored tone. Appeal of violation notice for noise complaint, Marcus Kendrick of 428 Desert Willow Drive. Mr. Kendrick, you have 5 minutes to present your case. I walked to the front and tried to keep my voice steady. Thank you. I'm here to appeal the 2 violation notices I received for using an impact wrench in my garage. First, I want to be clear that I'm not running a business. I do occasional repairs for friends and maintain my own vehicles. The tool in question is a cordless impact wrench that I use minimally and with my garage door closed to minimize any sound. The complaints indicate otherwise, Patricia interrupted. If I may finish, I said. I believe the complaints are either inaccurate or based on other noise sources. I'm willing to work with the board to find a reasonable solution, but the current enforcement seems inconsistent. I've observed several neighbors using lawn mowers, leaf blowers, and other equipment during the same daytime hours that supposedly violate the noise standards, but they haven't received violations. The silver-haired woman leaned forward. Are you accusing other residents of violations? No, I'm pointing out that the rules are being applied inconsistently. Lawn mowers and leaf blowers are significantly louder than my impact wrench, but they're not being cited. Patricia shuffled papers. Lawn maintenance is explicitly permitted under Section 15 of the bylaws as necessary for property upkeep. Mechanical automotive work is not. Where does it say that? I read Section 15, and it just talks about residents maintaining their property appearance. It doesn't give lawn equipment a noise exemption. The man with wire-rimmed glasses cleared his throat. Mr. Kendrick, the board interprets the bylaws with an understanding of their intent. Lawn care is expected and normal. A home garage operating as an automotive shop is neither expected nor normal in a residential community. I'm not operating a shop. I changed my wife's brakes and helped a neighbor with a tire rotation. That's not a commercial operation. Patricia held up a hand. Mr. Kendrick, your time is up. The board will deliberate and notify you of our decision within 7 business days. You may sit down." I wanted to argue that I had not even used 4 of my 5 minutes, but I could tell from their expressions that it would not matter. I sat back down while they moved on to item 8, which was someone's complaint about holiday decorations being left up too long. The meeting ended at 8:40. As people filed out, an older man with gray hair approached me in the parking lot. "That was a raw deal in there," he said. "I'm Edward Morrison. I live over on Sagaro Circle. Patricia did something similar to my son when he was helping me build a deck last year. She shut that down with bogus violation notices too." "How'd you fight it?" "We didn't. My son gave up and we hired a contractor who finished the work in 1 day, so there wasn't time for more complaints. But it cost me 3 times as much." Edward shook his head. "Patricia's been HOA president for 6 years. She runs this place like her personal kingdom. A few of us have tried to challenge her in elections, but she controls who gets nominated and how the voting works." "That's legal." "Technically, yes. The bylaws give the board president a lot of procedural authority, and she's got Margaret and Kenneth wrapped around her finger." He gestured back toward the clubhouse. "Those are the 2 older board members. The younger guy, Adam, he's pretty reasonable, but he's outvoted every time." I thanked Edward for the information and drove home feeling defeated. Sarah could tell from my expression how it had gone. 7 business days later, I received a formal letter from the HOA board denying my appeal. The letter stated that the violations were properly issued based on verified complaints from multiple residents, and that the board had determined my activities exceeded reasonable noise levels for a residential area. The fines would stand, and any further violations would result in escalating penalties and potential legal action. I paid the $250 fine because I did not want a lien on my house, but I also knew I could not just stop working in my garage. The money I made from side jobs helped cover our mortgage, and I genuinely enjoyed the work. I needed a different approach. That evening, I started researching professional sound measurement and noise ordinances. Arizona state law had specific decibel limits for different types of areas and times of day, but residential zones were generally allowed up to 55 decibels during daytime hours. The key was proving that my impact wrench fell below that threshold. I called around to audio engineering firms in the Phoenix area and eventually found a company called Precision Sound Analysis in Temp. I spoke with the owner, a guy named David Chen, who specialized in environmental noise assessments for commercial and legal purposes. I explained my situation, and he agreed to come out and conduct a professional measurement for $500. "What we'll do is measure your impact wrench from various distances and locations," David explained over the phone. "Then we'll compare those readings to other common residential noise sources. If your tool is within reasonable limits, you'll have documentation to present to your HOA. What if they just ignore it? Then you have evidence for a lawyer if it comes to that." HOAs have to follow their own rules and apply them fairly. If you can show they're being arbitrary or discriminatory, you have grounds to fight back. David showed up the following Saturday morning at 10 a.m. with 2 large cases of equipment. He was in his early 30s with black hair and a calm demeanor that immediately put me at ease. He set up a precision sound meter on a tripod in my driveway while I brought out my impact wrench. "Okay, go ahead and use it like you normally would," David said, watching his equipment. I ran the impact wrench in short bursts, the same way I would when actually working on a vehicle. The tool made its characteristic rapid clicking sound, but it was not what I would call loud, especially not compared to the lawn mower I could hear running 2 streets over. David checked his readings and nodded. Okay, that's registering at about 72 decibels from 10 feet away. Let me measure from different distances. He moved his equipment to 20 feet, then 40 feet, then to the sidewalk in front of my house, taking readings each time. Then he walked 4 doors down to where Patricia's house sat and took another reading. From her property, assuming she's inside her house, there's no way she's hearing anything significant from your tool, David said when he returned. At that distance, you're down to about 50 decibels, which is basically conversational volume, and that's with your garage door open. With it closed, it would be even less. So the complaints are bogus. Let's measure some comparison sources before we draw conclusions. David pulled out a commercial decibel meter app on his phone. Mind if we check out some of your neighbor's equipment? We walked around the subdivision for the next hour. David measured lawn mowers, which ranged from 85 to 95 decibels. Leaf blowers came in even higher, around 100 decibels. A neighbor was using a circular saw in his backyard to cut boards for a planter box, and that registered at 92 decibels. Even the landscaping crew that serviced the common areas was running equipment that measured over 90 decibels. This is exactly what I needed, I said as David packed up his equipment. This proves the HOA is full of it. It proves that your impact wrench is significantly quieter than other permitted activities in your neighborhood, David corrected. What the HOA does with that information is up to them, but at least you have objective data now. David provided me with a full written report 3 days later. It included detailed measurements, comparison charts, and photographs showing the measurement locations. The report concluded that my cordless impact wrench produced noise levels substantially below those of common residential maintenance equipment such as lawn mowers and leaf blowers, and that the sound levels at neighboring properties were well within acceptable ranges for daytime hours. I made 3 copies of the report, one for my records, one to submit to the HOA, and one to keep in reserve. I sent the HOA copy via certified mail with return receipt requested, along with a cover letter requesting that the violations be rescinded, and that I be permitted to continue normal vehicle maintenance activities during reasonable daytime hours. 2 weeks passed with no response. Then on a Wednesday afternoon while I was at work, Sarah called me in a panic. "Marcus, there's a Gilbert Code enforcement officer at the house. He says the HOA filed a complaint about illegal business operation without a license." "What? I'll be right there." I made it home in 15 minutes. A white truck with the town of Gilbert seal was parked in my driveway, and a man in a tan uniform was taking photos of my garage. Sarah stood on the porch with her arms crossed, clearly upset. "Are you Marcus Kendrick?" the officer asked when I approached. He was in his 40s with a mustache and a no-nonsense expression. "Yes. What's this about?" "I'm Officer Randy Mitchell with Code Enforcement. We received a complaint that you're operating an unlicensed automotive repair business out of your residence in violation of town zoning codes. This property is zoned R1 residential, which doesn't permit commercial vehicle repair operations. I'm not operating a business. I work on my own cars and occasionally help friends. Nobody's paying me." Officer Mitchell consulted a tablet. "The complaint indicates that multiple vehicles belonging to non-residents have been observed at your property, that you advertise services online, and that you accept payment for automotive work." "That's not true. Who filed this complaint?" "The Sunset Meadows Home Owners Association, submitted by the board president, Patricia Henderson." Of course it was. I felt my blood pressure rising. "Officer, I'm happy to show you around. I have a small home workshop where I do basic maintenance. I'm not running a commercial operation." I'll need to inspect your garage and any business records you maintain. I don't have business records because it's not a business. Mitchell followed me into the garage. It was organized but clearly personal, not commercial. I had a rolling toolbox, a floor jack, jack stands, and basic hand tools. No lift, no specialized commercial equipment, no customer waiting area, no signage. What about payments? Do people give you money for the work you do? Sometimes a friend will give me $20 for gas or buy me lunch, but I'm not charging service fees or operating as a business. It's just neighbor helping neighbor. Mitchell took more photos and notes. Do you advertise anywhere? No, social media. I mentioned on a neighborhood Facebook group once that I know how to change brakes. That's it. He nodded slowly. Okay, Mr. Kendrick, based on what I'm seeing, this doesn't look like a commercial operation. You're allowed to work on your own vehicles and help friends with theirs as long as you're not operating a business without proper licensing and permits. I'm going to close this complaint as unsubstantiated. The relief was immediate. Thank you. However, Mitchell continued, if the HOA files another complaint with more specific evidence of commercial activity, we'll have to investigate again. I'd recommend keeping things low-key and documenting that you're not running a business. After he left, I sat down with Sarah and tried to process what had just happened. Patricia had escalated from HOA violations to filing false complaints with the town. This was not just annoying anymore. It was harassment. We should talk to a lawyer, Sarah said. She's making false accusations now. That can't be legal. Lawyers are expensive. More expensive than constant fines and harassment. She had a point. I spent that evening researching attorneys who specialized in HOA disputes. Most wanted retainers of $3,000 to $5,000 just to get started. We had some savings, but that kind of money would hurt. Then, I found a legal aid organization called Arizona HOA Rights Advocacy. Their website said they offered free consultations and worked on contingency for some cases involving HOA overreach. I called the next morning and spoke with a paralegal who scheduled me for a consultation with one of their attorneys the following week. The attorney was a woman named Jennifer Marks, probably in her late 30s, with sharp eyes and an office full of case files. She listened to my entire story while taking notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. So let me make sure I have this right, Jennifer said when I finished. You received 2 violation notices for noise complaints that you believe are false or exaggerated. You paid 1 fine, appealed through the proper channels, got denied, and then obtained a professional sound study proving your equipment is quieter than other permitted activities. Then the HOA president filed a false complaint with code enforcement claiming you're running an illegal business, which was investigated and dismissed. Is that accurate? Yes. And do you have documentation for all of this? I pulled out a folder with copies of everything. The violation notices, my written appeal, the board meeting agenda, the denial letter, David Chen's sound study, the code enforcement complaint, and Officer Mitchell's closure report. Jennifer reviewed each document carefully. This is good. You've been thorough. The sound study is particularly helpful because it gives us objective evidence that the noise complaints are pretextual. Pretextual. It means they're using noise as an excuse to target you for another reason. Maybe Patricia doesn't like home automotive work on principle, or maybe she has something personal against you. Either way, if we can show that the HOA is enforcing rules inconsistently or in bad faith, we can challenge their actions. What would that look like? First, we'd send a cease and desist letter to the HOA demanding that they stop the harassment and rescind the violations. We'd cite the sound study and the code enforcement dismissal as evidence that their complaints are unfounded. If they continue with enforcement actions, we'd file a lawsuit for selective enforcement, harassment, and potentially abuse of process for the false code enforcement complaint. How much would that cost? The cease and desist letter is something we can do for a flat fee of $500. If it goes to litigation, we might be able to work on contingency if the case is strong enough, which this one is looking like it might be. We could seek to recover your legal fees from the HOA if we win. I talked it over with Sarah that night. $500 for a strongly worded lawyer letter seemed worth it if it would get Patricia to back off. We authorized Jennifer to proceed. The cease and desist letter went out via certified mail and email on May 3rd. It was 3 pages of dense legal language that boiled down to: stop harassing our client. Your complaints are unfounded. You're violating your fiduciary duty to enforce rules fairly. And if you continue, we will sue you into next week. Patricia's response came 6 days later, but not to me or my attorney. Instead, I received another pink violation notice in the mail. This one claimed that I had violated the noise ordinance on May 4th at 1:30 p.m. The fine was $500 as a third-tier violation. Additionally, the notice stated that my continued violations demonstrated a pattern of willful disregard for community standards, and that the board was considering further action, including legal proceedings, to compel compliance. The problem was that I had not used my impact wrench on May 4th. I had not worked on any vehicles at all that day. I was at the warehouse until 5 p.m., and Sarah could verify that I came straight home and we had dinner together. The complaint was completely fabricated. I called Jennifer immediately. They just sent me another violation for a day when I wasn't even home. This is a made-up complaint. Can you prove you weren't home? I was at work. My supervisor can verify it, and I'm sure there's security camera footage at the warehouse showing I was there all day. Get that documentation. We're filing suit. Over the next week, I collected everything Jennifer requested. A letter from my supervisor at the warehouse confirming I worked a full shift on May 4th from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Security camera timestamps showing me arriving and leaving, and a statement from Sarah confirming I came straight home. I also got statements from Tom Rodriguez and Edward Morrison, neighbors who confirmed they had never heard excessive noise from my garage. Jennifer filed a complaint in Maricopa County Superior Court on May 18th, naming the Sunset Meadows Homeowners Association and Patricia Henderson individually as defendants. The complaint alleged selective enforcement of HOA rules, harassment, defamation, abuse of process for the false code enforcement complaint, and violation of Arizona HOA statutes requiring good faith enforcement of covenants. The lawsuit asked for an injunction preventing further violation notices, rescission of all previous violations and fines, compensation for the fine I had already paid, payment of my legal fees, and punitive damages against Patricia Henderson, personally, for bad faith conduct. Getting Patricia Henderson served with the lawsuit papers was deeply satisfying. Sarah happened to be outside gardening when the process server showed up at Patricia's house, 4 doors down. She said Patricia's face went from confusion to shock to rage in about 5 seconds flat. That evening, my doorbell rang. It was Adam, the younger board member who had seemed reasonable at the meeting. He looked uncomfortable. "Marcus, hey, can we talk for a minute?" "Sure." Adam glanced back toward the street nervously. "Look, I just wanted you to know that not everyone on the board agrees with how Patricia's been handling this. Kenneth and Margaret basically rubber stamp whatever she wants, but I've been arguing that we're being too aggressive with you. I appreciate that. The thing is, Patricia is furious about the lawsuit. She called an emergency board meeting tonight, and they voted to authorize the HOA attorney to fight this hard. They're talking about countersuing you for legal costs and trying to get an injunction to stop you from using your garage for anything automotive related. They can't do that. I'm not violating any actual rules. I know, but Patricia's convinced this is about defending the HOA's authority. She's making it personal. Adam shifted his weight. I probably shouldn't be here telling you this, but I thought you should know what you're up against. Patricia has deep pockets and she's willing to drain the HOA reserves to win this fight, even though that money comes from everyone's dues. Why doesn't someone remove her as president? We tried last year. She controls the nominating process, and she's got enough supporters among the older residents who think she's keeping property values up. Plus, most people just don't pay attention to HOA politics until it affects them directly. After Adam left, I filled Sarah in on the conversation. The idea that Patricia was willing to waste everyone's HOA dues on a personal vendetta was infuriating, but it also told me we were dealing with someone who was not going to back down easily. The HOA's attorney filed an answer to our complaint 3 weeks later. It denied all allegations and asserted that the HOA had properly enforced its noise ordinance based on legitimate complaints from multiple residents. It also filed a counterclaim alleging that I had created a nuisance, violated community standards, and filed a frivolous lawsuit to harass the HOA. The counterclaim sought dismissal of my case and payment of the HOA's legal fees. Discovery began in July. That meant both sides could request documents and information from each other. Jennifer requested copies of all noise complaints filed in Sunset Meadows for the past 2 years, all violation notices issued for noise violations, all HOA board meeting minutes, and Patricia Henderson's personal communications regarding my property. The HOA's attorney tried to resist producing most of those documents, claiming they were privileged or irrelevant, but Judge Raymond Harper, who was assigned to our case, ordered them to comply. What came back was illuminating. Over the past 2 years, only 4 noise complaints had been filed in the entire subdivision. 3 of them were about my impact wrench. The 4th was about a party that went past 11 p.m. No other residents had received violations for lawn mowers, leaf blowers, construction work, or any other daytime noise. The selective enforcement was blatant. Even better, Patricia's emails were a goldmine. In one exchange with the other board members, she wrote, "We need to shut down Kendrick's garage operation before other residents think they can run businesses out of their homes. This is exactly the kind of thing that brings down neighborhood character and property values." Another email to Margaret from March said, "I've observed vehicles at the Kendrick property that don't belong to them. Clearly he's advertising somewhere. We should consider a code enforcement complaint to force the issue." Jennifer was thrilled. This shows intent to target you specifically and abuse the complaint process. The fact that she discussed filing a code enforcement complaint before she actually did it demonstrates that it was retaliatory, not based on genuine concerns. Can we use this at trial? Absolutely. This is going to make settlement negotiations very interesting. The HOA's attorney requested a settlement conference in September. Both parties, their lawyers, and a court-appointed mediator met in a conference room at the courthouse to see if we could resolve the case without trial. The mediator was a retired judge named Harold Stevens who had a grandfatherly demeanor but sharp eyes that suggested he did not miss much. He separated us into different rooms and shuttled back and forth with offers and counteroffers. The HOA's opening position was absurd. They would drop their counterclaim if I dropped my lawsuit, paid all outstanding fines, and agreed to never use power tools in my garage during daytime hours. "Tell them no," I said to Jennifer immediately. "That's exactly what they wanted in the first place." Jennifer counter-offered. The HOA would rescind all violations, refund my $250 fine, pay my legal fees, adopt a written noise policy with objective decibel standards, and Patricia Henderson would issue a written apology. Judge Stevens came back an hour later. "They've rejected your counter. They're now offering to rescind the violations and refund your fine if you drop the lawsuit and agree to follow a modified noise policy." "What's the modified policy?" "No impact wrenches during daytime hours. Other power tools permitted as long as garage door remains closed." "That's still targeting me specifically," I said. "They're not putting any restrictions on lawn mowers or leaf blowers." We went back and forth for 4 hours. The HOA slowly moved from their initial position, but they refused to budge on 3 points. No admission of wrongdoing, no written apology from Patricia, and some limitation on my impact wrench use. By 4 p.m., Judge Stevens looked tired. "Folks, I think we're at an impasse. The HOA's final offer is: rescind all violations, refund the fine, pay $5,000 toward your legal fees, and you can use your impact wrench as long as the garage door is closed, and you limit use to 15 minutes per day during daytime hours." Jennifer looked at me. "It's not everything we wanted, but it's something. The alternative is going to trial, which could take another 6 months and cost more money." "What about Patricia? She doesn't face any consequences for making false complaints." "Not in this settlement, no." I thought about it. Part of me wanted to take it to trial and make Patricia face a jury, but the practical side of me knew that litigation was expensive and uncertain. "What do you think?" "I think we made our point. We've got the violations rescinded, your money back, and you can continue working in your garage. The 15-minute limitation is annoying but workable. If you push to trial, you might win bigger or you might not, and either way it'll cost you time and stress." I agreed to the settlement. We signed papers that afternoon, and the case was dismissed with prejudice, meaning it could not be refiled. I walked out of the courthouse feeling like I had won something but lost something too. Patricia never had to apologize or admit she was wrong. She just had to open the HOA checkbook and make the problem go away. The settlement check arrived 3 weeks later. $250 for my refunded fine and $5,000 for legal fees. After paying Jennifer's firm their costs and fees, I ended up about even on the whole ordeal financially. But the real victory came in October when the HOA distributed updated community guidelines. Buried in Section 12 was new language. Noise complaints must be verified with calibrated sound level measurements showing sustained noise exceeding 75 decibels at the property line during restricted hours. Noise generated by approved maintenance activities, including lawn care, vehicle repair, and home improvement, is permitted during daytime hours provided it does not exceed 80 decibels at neighboring properties. Patricia had clearly fought this language, but the settlement required objective noise standards, and the board had apparently decided it was easier to apply them fairly than to keep fighting. The updated policy also required that violations be documented with specific measurements before fines could be imposed. I started working in my garage again, always keeping the door closed and watching the clock to make sure I was not using the impact wrench for more than 15 minutes at a stretch. The complaints stopped. I saw Patricia around the neighborhood occasionally, and she would glare at me but never said anything. Life returned to something like normal. Tom Rodriguez still brought his truck over for oil changes. I rotated tires for a couple from the next street over. Sarah's coworker asked me to diagnose a mysterious rattle in her minivan. The work continued, just quieter and more carefully documented. Then, in November, something unexpected happened. Edward Morrison called me on a Wednesday evening. "Marcus, you need to hear about this. Patricia just resigned from the HOA board." "What? Why?" "Apparently, the HOA reserves are way lower than they should be. The board hired an outside accountant to review the finances for the annual budget, and they found some irregularities." Margaret told my wife that Patricia might have been using HOA funds for personal expenses. I felt a chill. Like what kind of expenses? I don't know details, but the accountant is recommending a full forensic audit. The board is holding an emergency meeting next week to discuss it. The emergency meeting was standing room only. It seemed like half the neighborhood had heard rumors and wanted to know what was happening with their HOA dues. I stood in the back with Sarah while Kenneth, the older board member with wire-rimmed glasses, nervously addressed the crowd. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Kenneth began. "As many of you have heard, Patricia Henderson submitted her resignation as board president and as a board member, effective immediately. During our routine annual financial review, some discrepancies were identified in HOA expenditures over the past 18 months. The room erupted in questions. Kenneth raised his hands for quiet. "Please, let me finish. We have hired a forensic accounting firm to conduct a complete audit of all HOA financial records. Until that audit is complete, we cannot comment on specific findings. However, I want to assure everyone that the board is taking this matter very seriously. If any funds have been misappropriated, we will pursue all available legal remedies to recover them." "How much money are we talking about?" someone shouted. "We don't know yet." The initial review identified approximately $35,000 in questionable expenditures, but we need the full audit to determine the scope. $35,000. I looked at Sarah and saw my shock reflected in her face. That was not just padding expenses or a few reimbursement errors. That was theft. The forensic audit took 3 months. During that time, the subdivision was buzzing with speculation and rumors. Some people said Patricia had been embezzling for years. Others claimed she had used HOA funds to pay for her daughter's wedding or a luxury vacation. Adam, now acting as temporary board president, tried to keep things calm, but admitted they would not know the truth until the audit was complete. The final audit report was released in February of the following year. The HOA called another community meeting to present the findings. This time the room was packed beyond capacity, with people standing in the hallway trying to hear. The forensic accountant, a woman named Susan Park, presented her findings with professional detachment. Our review of all HOA financial records from January 2022 through December 2024 identified unauthorized expenditures totaling $68,423. The room went silent except for a few gasps. These expenditures include payments to vendors that appear to be fictitious or personal in nature, reimbursements to Mrs. Henderson for expenses that were either inflated or unrelated to HOA business, and direct transfers to accounts controlled by Mrs. Henderson without proper authorization or documentation. Susan clicked through slides showing examples. A $12,000 payment to a consulting firm that had no business license and an address that traced to Patricia's cousin's house. $8,000 in landscaping payments to a company that had done no work in the subdivision, but had done extensive landscaping at Patricia's personal residence. Thousands more in meals, travel, and other expenses that could not be justified as HOA business. Our opinion is that these expenditures constitute misappropriation of funds and likely meet the definition of theft under Arizona law, Susan concluded. We recommend that the HOA board consult with legal counsel regarding pursuing criminal charges and civil recovery. The board voted unanimously that night to refer the matter to the Gilbert Police Department. 2 weeks later, on a Thursday morning, I was leaving for work when I saw 2 Gilbert PD patrol cars parked in front of Patricia's house. Officers walked her out in handcuffs while neighbors watched from windows and yards. Patricia Henderson was charged with theft, fraud, and forgery. The case made the local news. According to the police report that was eventually released, Patricia had been systematically stealing from the HOA for almost 3 years, using increasingly sophisticated methods to hide the theft. She had created fake invoices, altered financial records, and even forged board member signatures on approval documents. The criminal case moved through the system slowly. Patricia pleaded not guilty initially, but the evidence from the forensic audit was overwhelming. In August, she accepted a plea agreement. She would plead guilty to 1 count of theft, pay full restitution of $68,000 plus interest and investigation costs, and serve 2 years of supervised probation. She also had to perform 300 hours of community service and agree to never serve on an HOA board again. The plea hearing was open to the public. I took a day off work to attend with Sarah. We sat in the back of the courtroom while Patricia, looking much smaller and older than I remembered, stood before Judge Maria Gonzalez and admitted her guilt. Mrs. Henderson, you understand that by pleading guilty, you are admitting that you stole money from your neighbors, people who trusted you to manage their community, Judge Gonzalez asked. Yes, Your Honor, Patricia said quietly. And do you understand the impact of your actions? These were not corporate funds or government money. This was money that came from families' budgets, money they paid expecting it would be used to maintain their home's values and their community's quality of life. Yes, Your Honor, I'm sorry. Judge Gonzalez accepted the plea and imposed the agreed sentence. Patricia was led away by the bailiff to begin processing her probation. As we left the courthouse, I felt an odd mix of satisfaction and sadness. Patricia had faced consequences for her actions, but it was not really about my noise complaints anymore. It was about betraying an entire community's trust for personal gain. The Sunset Meadows HOA spent the next year recovering and rebuilding. Patricia's restitution payments came slowly, but insurance covering the HOA for board member misconduct covered most of the loss. Adam officially became board president and recruited new members who were actually interested in serving the community rather than controlling it. The new board revised the bylaws to include better financial oversight, requiring 2 board members to approve any expenditure over $500 and mandatory quarterly financial reports to all homeowners. They also reformed the violation process, requiring photographic evidence and specific measurements for any complaints before fines could be issued. I continued working in my garage, though I was always careful to stay within the guidelines. Tom Rodriguez became something of a regular customer, always bringing me cases of beer or gift cards even though I never asked for payment. Word spread in a positive way this time, and I started getting requests from people around Gilbert for break work and basic repairs. Sarah suggested I look into actually getting a business license and doing it properly. You love this work, she said one Saturday evening while I was cleaning up my tools. "And you're good at it. Why not make it official?" "Because I don't want another fight with the HOA. The HOA isn't Patricia anymore, and they can't stop you from having a legal home-based business as long as you're following town ordinances." She was right. In October, I filed for a business license with the town of Gilbert for a mobile automotive repair service. Since I went to customers instead of having them come to my garage, it met zoning requirements for a home-based business. I even talked to Adam about it first, and the board had no objections as long as I was not creating traffic or noise issues. I named the business Kendrick Mobile Mechanics and printed up business cards. The work picked up steadily through word of mouth. I kept my day job at the warehouse for the steady income and benefits, but the side business brought in enough extra that Sarah and I could actually save money and take a real vacation for the first time in years. One afternoon in December, I was finishing an oil change for a customer when I saw Edward Morrison walking up my driveway. "Hey, Edward, what's up? I've got a proposition for you. My daughter just bought a house in Mesa and her car's making a weird noise. Any chance you could take a look?" "Sure, I can drive out there this weekend if she wants." Edward smiled. "You know, when you first moved in and Patricia started giving you hell, I thought you'd either give up or move away. A lot of people would have. I thought about it. I'm glad you didn't. The way you stood up to her and then everything that came out afterward, it was good for this neighborhood. People are paying attention now. We've got new board members who actually care. Patricia's gone. Things are better." "I just wanted to work on cars in my garage," I said. "Sometimes standing up for something small means standing up for something big," Edward said. "Anyway, let me know about my daughter's car." As I watched Edward walk back down the street, I thought about everything that had happened over the past year and a half. It started with a noise complaint and an impact wrench, and a woman who thought she could push me around because she had a title and a clipboard. It ended with a criminal conviction, a reformed HOA, and me running a legitimate business doing what I loved. The whole experience taught me that HOAs could be either good or terrible depending on who ran them and whether homeowners paid attention. It taught me that standing up for yourself was worth it even when it was expensive and stressful. And it taught me that sometimes the most important fights were the ones you never expected to have. That evening, Sarah and I sat on our back patio watching the sunset paint the Arizona sky in shades of orange and purple. The neighborhood was quiet except for the distant sound of someone's lawn mower, easily registering above 80 decibels but bothering no one because it was just normal life in a residential area. "You ever regret buying this house?" Sarah asked. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But we're here now, and it's ours. Patricia doesn't get to take that away from us. Plus you've got all those fancy sound measurements proving you're quieter than a lawn mower," Sarah said with a smile. 72 decibels compared to 95, I said. "Best $500 I ever spent." We sat there as the evening cooled and lights started coming on in houses across Sunset Meadows. The community had been through something painful but necessary, like lancing a wound to let it heal properly. Patricia Henderson's theft and eventual arrest were never something I could have predicted when she first rang my doorbell with that pink violation notice. But in a strange way, it all connected. Her need for control, her willingness to make false complaints and file bogus reports, her insistence that rules applied to me but not to others. Those were all symptoms of someone who saw the HOA as her personal domain to rule as she wished. The same personality that led her to harass me over an impact wrench was the personality that convinced her she could steal from her neighbors without consequence. In the end, she faced consequences for both. Not because of anything I did specifically, but because standing up to her abuse of power created enough scrutiny that her other abuses came to light. The forensic audit happened because the lawsuit made the board take a harder look at how Patricia operated. The dominoes fell one by one. My phone buzzed with a text from a new customer asking about break work. I quoted him a price and scheduled him for Tuesday afternoon. Business was good. The HOA was functional. Patricia Henderson was gone. And I could use my impact wrench whenever I needed it, secure in the knowledge that at 72 decibels from 10 feet away, I was well within any reasonable noise standard. Sometimes justice took longer than you wanted and came in forms you did not expect, but it still came. The sound engineer's measurements proved what I had known all along. I was not the problem. The person with the clipboard and the constant complaints was the problem. And in the end, that problem had been solved not just for me, but for everyone in Sunset Meadows. I finished my beer and stood up. I'm going to work on the Civic's front suspension. Want to time me and make sure I don't go over 15 minutes with the impact wrench, Sarah laughed. You don't have to follow that settlement limitation anymore. The new bylaws superseded it. I know, but old habits die hard. I walked into my garage and powered up my DeWalt cordless impact wrench. The familiar clicking sound started up, a sound that had caused so much trouble but was really just the sound of honest work being done. 72 decibels, quieter than a lawn mower. Proof that sometimes when someone complains about noise, they are really complaining about something else entirely. The sun finished setting over Gilbert, Arizona. Life in the suburbs continued with all its small dramas and routine maintenance needs. And in my garage at 428 Desert Willow Drive, I tightened lug nuts and fixed brake calipers and helped neighbors keep their vehicles running, exactly like I had always wanted to do. The story of HOA Karen and the impact wrench was over. The story of Kendrick Mobile Mechanics and a community that learned to hold its leaders accountable was just beginning. And if anyone ever complained about noise again, well, I had a very thorough professional sound study ready to go. Some battles you win by being louder. Others you win by proving you were never too loud in the first place. Patricia Henderson learned that lesson the hard way, sitting in a courtroom pleading guilty while her former neighbors watched. I learned it by standing my ground, documenting everything, and trusting that the truth would matter if I could prove it. In the end, justice was not about revenge or proving I was right all along, though both of those felt good. Justice was about a community functioning the way it was supposed to, with fair rules applied fairly, and leaders who served instead of ruled. That was worth fighting for. That was worth $500 for a sound engineer and thousands more for a lawyer and months of stress and uncertainty. Because now, when I used my impact wrench, I did not worry about pink violation notices or false code enforcement complaints or HOA board meetings. I just did my work, helped my neighbors, and enjoyed the satisfaction of fixing things that were broken. And Patricia Henderson was somewhere else, performing court-ordered community service and paying back money she stole, learning her own lessons about accountability and consequences. The garage door was open now. The evening was cool. The impact wrench clicked away at 72 decibels. And everything was exactly as it should be.